everybody. Today we're looking at the two main verses that we have as our church vision verses for this year, which are John 13, 34 and 35. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. As we think about who we are, to think about what we're all about as a church, as a family, what better verses to have as a vision, or even more than that, as a mandate for us as God's family at Grace Church, because it's a command. Love one another. A new command that Jesus said to his disciples at that Last Supper. Now, how is it a new command, you might be saying or thinking? What about Leviticus 19, where it says, love your neighbour as yourself? And which then comes up again in the parable of the Good Samaritan. Love your neighbour. What was new about what Jesus was saying to his disciples about the need for them to love one another? What was new about it? Good question. Well, it's a new command in that it shows us how high the bar is for us. It's it's really high. It's like when we're talking about loving one another, Jesus is setting the kind of the benchmark, and it's love that, if you think about it, ultimately it means laying down your life for the ones you love. As I have loved you, love one another. As I have loved you, love one another. Now, right at the start of John 13, right at the very start of this chapter that we're going through at the moment, John 13, verse 1, he says, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. He loved them to the end. And then throughout the rest of chapter 13, we see Jesus' love in a different way, a different aspect of his love in John chapter 13. We see a love that is concerned for the disciples' faith, and it's a love that is concerned for what and who they feel able to trust at a time when there's so much going on around them to concern them. And despite the disciples' shortcomings and their failings, we see Jesus' love for them remains constant. And it's a love that remains an unconditional love for them. And as Jesus' family today, he looks at each of us as well, with all of our shortcomings and all of our failings, and he loves us. He loves you and me. Now, in Connect Group yesterday, which by the time you're watching this will mean Connect Group last week, when Jim was teaching us, we saw how Jesus even shows his love for Judas right at the end. Even knowing that Judas would betray him, he still treats Judas in a very loving way. And then we see in these 4 verses that surround our focus vision verses, our 2 sort of vision verses are surrounded by these 4 verses where we see Jesus' love for Peter. In these 4 verses around Peter, the one who Jesus knows is soon going to deny him 3 times before the next day even fully starts. Jesus says, my children, I will be with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and just as I told the Jews, so I tell you now, where I am going, you cannot come. Peter asked him, Lord, where are you going? Jesus replied, where I am going, you cannot follow now, but you will follow later. Peter asked, Lord, why can't I follow you now? I will lay down my life for you. And then Jesus answered, will you really lay down your life for me? Very truly, I tell you, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. Now, what do we think about Peter at this moment? I'm sure he meant what he was saying, but for all his good intentions, he was still going to deny Jesus very soon. And the other disciples didn't do a lot better. They all ran away, didn't they? Abandoned Jesus. But Peter was so sure of his love for Jesus, and he wanted Jesus to know that. But actually, what he needed was to see Jesus' love for him. So verse 38 is, in a way, it's kind of quite ironic, where Jesus says to Peter, will you really lay down your life for me? Because we know, don't we, that Jesus is the good shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep. He loves us to the end. And like Peter, we can sometimes think that our Christian lives are just about our love for Jesus and trying to prove our love for Jesus. And we do love Jesus. But our vision now, or our mandate, if you like, is to focus on the much bigger truth that Jesus loves us. His love is for people like us, well, people like Peter, and people like us when we fail, when we desert him even, when we deny him. So we might look like good Christians on Sundays and other times, but we've got so many shortcomings and failings. But the point is that Jesus knows about that. He knows our true hearts, and he still loves us. He said, I know those who I've chosen. I know those who I've chosen. He knows every one of us. So perhaps like Peter, we need to think hard about Jesus' love for us, the love of the shepherd who laid down his life for the sheep. Now we know, don't we, that Peter wept bitterly after he denied Jesus 3 times that night. He must have felt he'd completely blown it now. What could be done? All hope lost. I've denied Jesus 3 times. But then, after his resurrection, Jesus reconciled with Peter. Jesus then asked Peter 3 times, do you love me? He was giving Peter a chance to reaffirm his love for Jesus, to undo what he'd done in denying Jesus before. And we know how Peter then went on as a great leader. Jesus' love for his disciples and for us meant that he would stoop down to the very lowest point. We've read in the last couple of weeks how he would stoop down and wash the disciples' feet. He would take the lowest place of the lowest job of the lowest slave. We know how he would serve humbly. And of course, we know how he would go to the very depths and serve us at the cross. That's how Jesus loves us. And I think we've now seen also in chapter 13 that Jesus' love is a love that's full of grace. Graciously, he loves Judas. He loves Peter, who fails and denies him and deserts Jesus. And we see also in the chapter how he loves those whose faith is weak and fragile. It's a very, very totally inclusive love, full of grace. So the question, of course, is our love like that? Is our love for one another like that? Not just loving those who like us or who we like, not just loving those who help us or serve us or please us, but actually loving those who let us down, loving those who disappoint us. Is it love for those who fail? Is it the kind of love that costs everything? Is it the kind of love that Jesus showed? Because, I mean, if it is, then the outworking of our vision will be that people will come to Jesus through us this year. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Because what Jesus didn't say in chapter 13, or what he didn't even say anywhere, is, you guys, you need to be the church with the best coffee. And he didn't say, well, guys, you need to be the church with the slickest promotional videos. Or he didn't say, you need to be the church with the greatest tents at Creation Fest. I wasn't looking for that. He didn't even say, you need to try to be the church with the most professional music group. Didn't say that. What people need to see of us is our love for one another. Love like Jesus' love for us. Love that was actually defined by the cross. Now, I know it's a tall order, but that's our vision. John also wrote this in his first letter. This is how we know what love is. Jesus laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another. So, what is your vision for Grace Church for the rest of this year? I know Jim and the elders asked us that question last October. And no doubt we all had exciting thoughts about how we see ourselves a year from then. A bigger church family with many more who we've reached out to in our lives, in our workplaces, in our neighborhoods, in our families, perhaps, our mission fields. And if so, how will we have achieved that? By doing lots of specific things, or by being a truly loving family? As Jesus said, as I have loved you, so you must love one another.